Take 3. Hello, folks, and welcome to another episode of Yes and Ask Me. I'm Clint, and I am the substitute host for Rick, who due to unforeseen circumstances will not be joining us this week, but he'll be back next week. This is an improv podcast that we do every single Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And you can also catch up on episodes that you missed on our YouTube channel. Who is us? We're Bexar Stage Theater out of San Antonio. Today, we are discussing editing in improv. And with that, I will bring out my first guest and co-host, Tina Jackson. Tina, would you come on?
Where's Rick? No, don't answer that.
Yes.
Hi. How are you, Clint?
I'm doing good, Tina. How are you doing?
I'm glad to see you. Happy to start this week with a little improv talk.
Good. Tina, would you tell the guest a brief history of Tina and improv so they get to know you?
The very abridged version is I've been improvising for 20 years. 10 of those years was spent in Chicago learning from some of the masters. And then I moved my cute little butt all the way to San Antonio, Texas, about 1,500 miles with just my husband and my cat, and started Bexar Stage about 3 years ago. And now, due to also unforeseen circumstances, we are, online now.
Right. Yes.
Yep. So 3 years of Bexar Stage, 10 years in Chicago, 20 years total. Love me some improv.
We are online, but the good news about being online is we get to talk with people from all over.
That's true.
So we have a special guest with us today from Cold Town Theater. Amy Knop, would you unmute your video and come on?
Hi, y'all. Thanks for having me.
Hey.
Amy, you're right there, right in front of Cold Town.
Casting live from the street
Parking
Airport
lot.
Boulevard. Mm-hmm.
Right there under the I Love Video sign.
Mm-hmm. It's great lighting. That's why I look so washed out.
So Amy, I first watched her in 2019 as part of one of my favorite improv troupes, Prayer Circle, at the Big Little Comedy Festival. And that was a very inspirational show for me, just because I was so young in my improv career, and it was an amazing show. So Amy, could you tell us about how long you've been doing improv and other projects you're involved in?
Thank you first for that. I have been performing improv for about 5 years. I started with classes at my beloved Cold Town Theater here in North Austin, and moved quickly into getting involved in all aspects, producing shows. I directed my first main stage this year. And of course, my troupe of my heart, Prayer Circle Comedy, has been doing improv and also sketch comedy for several years now. And like everyone else around the world, all these projects are just adapting to the internets and finding new ways and using our creativity to move forward. So I'm excited to be here to talk with y'all.
Yeah, absolutely. Good to have you.
And the final guest is the master of editing at Bexar Stage, the technical director, David Grinnell. Would you come on the video?
Hey guys.
David!
Hey, David, you are a very exciting guest because I think you're the first
I will say it, non-improviser.
person who doesn't play a bunch. He is an improviser. I've seen him on stage, but his main role is in the tech booth.
Yeah.
Which is, go ahead, David.
I'm more behind the scenes, working in the dark, literally.
Literally in the dark, for sure.
Making sure that when you guys are on stage, you look good and sound good.
And we appreciate it, David. That's why you're not just the guy in the booth. You're one of us.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
I mean, that sounds stupid, but you know it's true.
Yeah.
So, I love this panel, I guess. This is fun.
So David has some of the most editing power, probably the most responsibility for editing in an improv show. And that power it's a responsibility because kind of David is responsible for making us look good, which goes to show how important editing is. So Tina, would you introduce our topic to the folks at home?
Yeah. So today we're talking about editing, where that comes to improv. You from the audience may or may not notice or may or may not have perceived this consciously, but there are sort of vocabulary that we use, signals we give to each other on stage to say, hey, this scene's over and we're moving on to something else. And it's a little hard to demonstrate online what we would normally do on stage, because it's like a physical motion. But there are lots of different kinds and styles of editing, but basically what it signals to our fellow players is, hey, this scene's over, let's move on to something else. To string a bunch of things together in a montage, or to use edits within a form to signal like moving on to the next scene of a herald, or what have you. A lot of different styles and flavors of improv use a lot of different editing styles. There are, of course, mono scenes that exist where there are no edits until the very end, where David comes into play and takes the lights out. But editing is it's a form of improv vocabulary that we all share, that we teach very early on to make sure that those moves are made as a group, so that when one person says, hey, this scene's over, that's something that we now can agree to in those scenes. And we've talked about that in previous episodes.
So, Amy, I want to jump straight over to you with Prayer Circle, who runs a montage which has a bunch of edits in very short scenes. So there's a lot of time to get edits in. At the last Big Little Comedy Festival, y'all had a scene that was in a bathroom. Do you remember the scene?
I think so.
It got edited, and then somebody came out from the back line, or another player on Prayer Circle came out and initiated another scene within the bathroom. And it was this moment of, I think, confusion a little bit for your team about like, oh, are we really still in here? And so with that, maybe as a jumping off point, what do you need to do as a player to properly communicate your edit to your team and to the audience?
Well, first I would say, if there are no mistakes in improv, if an edit gets misread, that's just a beautiful opportunity for creativity.
Oh,
and I
hell
think,
yes.
Fun playfulness. But right, I think generally in terms of like, the basics of improv, some of your more obvious edits, like your wipe edits, like you do it aggressively with clear physicality. You make sure that you're visible to your teammates. Like anything else, you do it with intention. No wishy-washy, I'm kind of editing, I'm kind of not, like, and there's many different types of edits, but I feel like even though it sounds like such a technical subject to talk about how you end or change scenes, I feel like it really embodies a lot of other philosophies of improv, like intention, following your gut about when to do it, the importance of communication with everyone else in your team.
Yeah, it really is totally about communication. It's when I do this, you do that, right? Like, almost a call and response of when I run across the stage without making eye contact, without engaging in the scene that's currently happening. When I run across your scene, I'm not communicating anything to you except go away, this one's over. Right. Like it's God, it's more difficult to explain in this setting than I would have imagined, honestly. But.
Yeah. And I think there's so much, like, as you get to know your team better and the people you play with, you can tell even with the look in their eye, are they going to start the next scene just because they edited, or did they just feel like it was time to change the scenes? One of those things, I feel like familiarity breeds better edits, as you all get a feel for each other and what rhythms you like, and you kind of know what somebody's doing.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty good point too, is that there are many different reasons to edit. One is, the scene has sort of played its course and we've seen enough of it. Another probably more predominant reason to edit is the scene has reached its climax. We've heightened as far as would be funny, and we're at the height of the scene, and now's the best time to cap it off, because the scene will never cap this moment, so let's clear it and make way for something else. Sometimes you sweep something because you're like, oh, I want to come back to this, I don't want to see it right now, I want to get something set for, I want to see this character in a different place. I want to see the scenario in a different way. You're setting up for a callback.
Yeah.
And then, of course,
I think
oh yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, I think it all ties back to trust of your team as well. Like that you'll have my back to edit the scene when it needs to be done, or that if I edit, like I don't even need to have the next idea preloaded per se, although it'd be great if I did, because I know you'll have my back and stepping out into the void just because editing was the right thing to do at that time.
Totally. Yeah. I think sometimes that's where, especially younger improvisers will get hung up a little bit, is I don't have anything and therefore I won't edit. And editing is really about having your teammates back. It's whatever is happening on stage is the most important thing right now. And if that scene is over, it is your job to let it go. It's your job to signal everyone that it's over. And so I think one of the things we really try to hit in our classes is edit even if you don't know what's coming next, because if you have to know what's coming next in order to feel good about editing, you'll never edit, as young improvisers especially. Clint, would you say that too as a level 1 teacher?
Yeah,
that they'll never edit unless you tell them like to just do it.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Like if they think too hard about it
anyway, so you can't have anything preloaded for the next scene. So yeah, David, I want to get you involved in this conversation.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
So you have the final say in terms of scenes, and you have no kind of holdback about like, I gotta have an idea. You just end the scene.
Yeah, end the scene, end the show, end it.
It depends. Honestly, it depends on the team playing and the lineup in the show. If it's a team I know and I'm familiar with how they play, that gives me some wiggle room, basically. Like Clint, you and Matt doing Bachelor of Science. Love that because it does give me some wiggle room at figuring out, because I have 2 things to work with. A good ending point, and I'm not looking for a perfect bow on every show, but a solid end point that lets the crowd feel content with what they've seen.
Yeah.
It's complete. But also meeting a time requirement so that we don't run our show into the next block of time or something like that. So finding that happy medium can be challenging sometimes, but sometimes the teams make it easy. Like you guys, I play the classical music while you go backstage to change and have the person write their silly whatever. And when I fade the music out, that you guys are good to come back out. And then also it's really a soft edit because I kind of pick where the show ends based on what y'all are talking about and my time. And I can basically swell the music. You guys can finish what you're saying to complete a thought and sort of bookend the elements of the show, and it's fully finished.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's interesting. Bringing up a soft edit, of course, that is opposed to a hard edit. So
right.
for those
which is just the lights go out and it's over. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And for other teams, for most teams, a blackout is the preferred or required edit. Mm-hmm. And there's a number of things that go through my head to figure out where that needs to be. Again, time, but also, is it a format where I'm meeting beats? First beat, second beat, third beat. And once they hit that third beat, I've got to find a clean endpoint. And I'm not looking for a joke.
So I'm totally cutting in here, but this is so much what I love about having somebody who has some improv training in the booth. Yeah. Because what you're saying is so critical to the success of the show is respecting the form that the show takes.
For sure.
And the artistic elements that the team is trying to put out and put on stage is, Jump Stitch being a team that's got a lot more tech requirements mid-show than say a typical mono scene, right? Something from Ramen on Sunday, you're not going to have as many edits as you are with Ramen on Sunday or Jump Stitch, right? But it's about understanding what the form of the show is. What tells me that the show is about to end? Is it the clock that tells me it's about to end? Is it a move that tells me, oh, they're not going to get, they're not going to escalate higher than this. This is a good time to wrap that up. Or is it the form that says, oh, give them another minute so they can try to race through this third beat and hit a happier endpoint for their team. It's about the communication that you're doing with them on stage without speaking to them after they give you whatever their opening song is,
Exactly. And that goes in with knowing what their format is, or if they have a format.
Right.
And understanding what's needed for that. And part of the reason I've gotten good at it is because I was bad at it.
I was gonna bring that up, but I didn't want to rub it in. But these are good stories.
And one of them was a team Tina was on early on, and I know she remembers because I made her laugh. I believe it was 4 stories that were crisscrossing and tying together, and once the first team got back together, that was supposed to be the end of it, but they ended about 4.5 minutes early. And I was like, man, that's really early finish. And I didn't black it out, and I should have.
Yeah.
And so they all went backstage, and it was just an eternity of silence on a lit stage.
We were like, oh, our show's over. And Dave was like, nah.
And Tina pops out from behind stage. She was like, and that's our show tonight.
That's it. We're done. I was like, I don't want to come out I don't want 4.5 more minutes if we fucking bookended the show perfectly, right? Like I want the show to look the best possible. And we didn't need those 4.5 minutes to be able to do it. I was happy with that show. So I remember ending that show and just being like, I know David's going to feel really bad about this, but I'll have to take care of it later because I don't want to do 4.5 more minutes.
I had to learn sometime.
No, but that was very early on in your tech experience. And so I think, and that was one of those things where I was like, you're not married to the time, right? And that's something that we have talked about is I give like a time range where I was like 20 to 22 minutes for this team and 20 to 25 for this team. So it's like, if they get 20 minutes and that's what they need, cut them. And if they need the full 25 or if they're really like cranking,
go
20. Give them the full 25. It's not a matter of juicing every, it's like you want to get the most out of your show.
But sometimes getting the most out of the show actually means cutting it a little short.
That goes for scene work too. That goes for regular scene work too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sometimes the scene is better shorter. And I say this to everybody in my sketch class as well, is like SNL does 11-minute sketches. And I'm never going to say, yes, 11 minutes is the right length for a sketch. Never. I'm never going to say that. Because 2 to 3 minutes is what sketch needs, right? Yeah. Like we just keep it zippy. And other people have different opinions about that. So like Amy might, for example, disagree, but
I like everything
shorter sketches. I like shorter sketches. They get to the fucking point. They make the joke. Everything pops. There's no wasted dialogue. And we zip right on out of there, baby.
I think it speaks to like in sketch and improv, like the work you put in at the top of the scene. Like if you start at the scene strong, communicating what's going on, you can get to the games and play them and heighten them fast. And then you don't need an 11-minute scene to meander into what you're trying to find if you're playing very game based.
I normally find when I read the first draft of a sketch is that I'll be like, cut this whole first part, and they'll be like, what? That's the whole setup. And I was like, nope, we understand we're in a school. We understand we're at not just a school, we're at Hogwarts right away. Like we don't need to introduce all of the characters. People will see who they are. And if it's not important to say, Professor Snape, what happened at the owlry earlier today, blah, blah, blah. If it's not important to say, cut it. And that's true for scene work too. When you're just playing a regular old improv scene, jump into the middle of it, and capping it off at a high point, instead of waiting for the scene to just find its natural. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, cool.
I'd love to talk about too, both from the tech booth perspective and within the scenes. Of course, it's easy to say, I'll edit it at the high point, but sometimes you're in a scene or a show, which is petering out for whatever reason, and you have to make those hard decisions.
or the high point that like they never get to the high point. Like you can tell they're approaching. and I realize, oh man, it's another 6 minutes before they get to the good point. And we don't have 6 minutes left in this show.
Yeah.
So speaking about if there is a low point, the good thing is about edits is there's a bunch of different types of edits.
Mm-hmm.
And I know from taking the Bexar Stage curriculum, there's a cop out for if you don't see your scene partners ever getting to a high point to bail them out of the scene, you just walk on stage and do a verbal edit. And there's a bunch of different types of
verbal edit, yeah.
And so one of the questions from the chat that I'm interested in your opinions and thoughts is what is the most inventive way to edit that you have seen? What's the most inventive or one of the most creative ways that you've edited or you've seen edited?
I've got one. Does somebody have one?
Go ahead.
Okay. So one time, and this was in a rehearsal, so it never saw the light of day, but it made me laugh so much as an edit, is we talk about theme edits as a way to sweep the show. Oh no, did our video go out? I'm double checking if it's just my computer or if the video went out. Give it a second. It's still, oh, we're good. Sorry, everyone. My bad. It was in a rehearsal. We talked about theme edits in the theme of the scene to do sort of a theme swipe instead of running across with no necessary character just to kill the scene. To come on as like some element that belongs in the world and just do sort of a thematic sweep. And so in this scene, it was a missed opportunity rehearsal. And I don't remember who, I think I was on stage with somebody and we were doing a figure skating scene. And Samantha Grubbs comes on as a Zamboni, and she just, as she was crossing the stage, she was like, just like,
nice.
And we were like, what is going on? Like, what is she adding to the scene? And she just absolutely said, Zamboni edit. And kept going. And I honestly, like, it has never gotten funnier for me than that. Sam Grubbs makes me laugh. Yeah, it was a super fun one, and nobody ever saw it except just missed opportunity, and it was we laughed about it for a while. But I like those kinds of theme edits of just finding an inventive way. I've seen it before, the same idea of like we're in a jungle and somebody like grabs a metaphor, like a mysterious vine and swings across, and they're like, but they normally with a theme edit, it's hard to tell. The communication is hard to tell whether somebody's trying to be in the scene, if the Zamboni is trying to like bring a piece of information. So Sam saying Zamboni edit made me laugh and worked really well because I understood, oh good, we're having a laugh about it, but also getting the F out of there. We're done with this scene. So the Tarzan edit was another one where he sort of screamed and we were all like, oh, look, is it? And he was like, nope, that was an edit. And he called it the sideline. And I'm fine with it as long as you're having fun.
We could call that a yes and edit because you're honoring what happened in the scene while still editing. Amy, did you have one?
Oh, yeah. Not a specific example, but I think one of my favorite styles of edits is actually organic edits. So where there is no hard division from one scene to the next, but maybe it's a sound or a movement, or if I had to like hold up a great example of this, the Troop Echo Lake here in Austin, almost their whole show is organic transitions. They're very like kind of avant-garde, and they really settle into one scene. They just explore organic motion and sound. But what I like about organic edits is instead of like sometimes there's like a hard stop feeling of a wipe edit, like the energy, we hit a peak and then the energy goes down. When I feel like an organic edit helps fill the space, like it's something to be excited about in its own. It's playful in its own right, and like the whole team can get in on, we're gonna all edit together. We're all gonna come on stage for this edit. We're gonna pick out something from the last scene that maybe is thematically stand out, like we were talking about, and we're gonna carry it into the next scene, and everything kind of bleeds together. I find that very interesting creatively.
I think that's one way too, in my mind, that makes shows really stand out from each other can be the way that they edit, because a lot of times when you're doing those organic edits, how the edit happens can also really contribute to the next scene. So in my mind, as I'm thinking through the show afterwards, you know, whether I'm coaching, whether I'm performing in it, and just thinking through the show, whatever, as I think about the things where it's like, okay, so we were at the shopping mall and the kid flew by in the cart, and that's how we edit it, whatever. And that takes us into the next scene where we're race car drivers, and somehow, like that little bridge now is not insignificant. It's not just the division line between that scene and this new one. It's a part of the show. And I think that, and I think in sketch, it can be really cool too, and to have like a runner or a moment with the audience or like whatever, to transition between a couple of scenes and stuff. So it's not, like you said, not so hard stop.
Yeah, it reminds me of the movie Slacker a little. The transitions between scenes are following characters, and that initiates the next story in a way.
Mm-hmm. Totally.
David, talking about theme edits and organic edits, I know something that you love to do, and is so fun for the audience too, is music edits, where the blackout combines themes from the show by picking the right song to go along with it. Can you talk about that?
Every chance I get. If somebody in a scene or in the show, if they discuss music or a musician or any kind of musical reference in the scenes, I do what I can to try to bring that back with their blackout edit. One of the first ones that pops into my head, honestly, is Alex Flores with Selena reference in one of the Thursday night Key Party shows.
Key parties, yeah.
Yeah. She's done that a couple of times, and so I always have 2 or 3 of Selena's greatest hits ready to go right at the chorus. Something that everybody's gonna recognize. And it's like, oh, I know that song. Oh, wait, that's Selena. They talked about Selena.
And you blow everybody's minds.
Yeah.
You're right, everyone in the chat. David is the best.
I can't see the chat, so thank you.
I know. No, I love those moments too. And you do it sometimes, depending, again, like you said, on how comfortable you are with the team, how familiar you are with them. When there's a guest team visiting from out of town, we don't throw a lot of technical elements at them unless they ask for them.
And
because we want to be respectful to their show.
Right.
But when it's me and Lex on stage and we start a scene in a seedy dive bar, is that you'll throw some jazz up and we'll just, crank away with some environment work or whatever. And I love that. I think that's such a cool form of support from the booth. I think editing is one of the best forms of support you can offer your team. So when we're talking about editing, I think we're really talking about support. We're supporting, what we teach in level 1 is whatever's happening on stage is the most important thing that's happening. If you're on the back line and you're thinking about how you can initiate next, or if you're worried about like, oh, I haven't done anything funny yet, I need to jump out more. Is my mom here? Where is she? Like if you're on the back line thinking about anything besides what's the action that's currently happening on the stage, I think you're doing the show a real disservice. So by paying attention, by staying focused on the action of the scene, whether it's you, whether it's your teammate, whether it's David in the booth, who's going to end that scene and that show moment, paying attention to how we can wrap these things up the best way possible is the best support, by making all of our scene partners look good, by making all of our scenes look as good as possible, by killing it when it's over and bringing it back if you want to later. I think those are some of the most excellent forms of support that we can offer.
Go ahead. I was just going to echo, as a performer, there's nothing feels more delightful than to be surprised at the end from the tech booth, someone putting on a song that I know it's delightful for the audience, but also performer, it sends a little thrill on your spine. You're like, oh my God, they were listening.
Yeah.
And
often, and especially in key parties, whatever song David ends with, normally in the blackout, I have like a big, ugly open mouth laugh where I'm like, oh, what? This song? And he's like, yep.
And half the time when there's a team that Lex is on, I try to pick a song that's going to get Lex's attention and possibly throw him off.
Because it does. It really does.
Yeah.
Throw
but
him where he's like, oh, interesting. And he'll make
for
3
him,
comments about that before he gets into the show.
It's kind of a game between him and I, how I can make a reference.
Stop distracting him, David. I need him.
I think it really speaks to like how tech is really part of the cast. I know some people probably like compartmentalize and think it's like separate, but for the main stage I directed at Cold Town this January, I very intentionally cast a tech person, Dylan Garcia, who's also a amazing improviser, because I wanted them to feel empowered to make decisions with music or lights that can affect what's happening on stage, like to truly have it be like a two-way street between people on stage and people in the booth to communicate like what's going on and mutually influence. Because I feel like tech gets undersold, but you really like influence the whole experience and the feeling of the show.
I do really like about I think the Austin scene in particular is how involved the text really can be in the show, and that's one thing that we really liked and wanted to do more of in San Antonio as well, which is why David, as he has grown as a technical performer and as people have grown more comfortable with him and the editing style that he has and the fun and different elements that he can really bring from the booth into the show, that sometimes people will be like, yeah, do whatever you want, play with it, and we'll go with it until you take the lights all the way out and right. Tell us our show is over. Yeah. Which, you know, I love doing because it's just having somebody else on stage with you that's unseen, right? It's the third person in your duo, it's the fourth person in your trio, it's whatever. It's having somebody else on stage without being on stage who's there to support you.
And that was actually something that was told to me when I started learning tech, was you need to think of yourself as the final team member making the final edit. You're not just this external force, you're part of the team. So you have to pay attention to what's going on and be a part of the scene work.
Yeah, and I think in a lot of theater settings, and I'm talking more traditional theater at this point, rather than specifically improv theater, but like there's a lot of like we're the onstage talent versus the offstage talent. There's a lot more, I think, division, but especially as we start training improvisers to get in the booth and get comfortable with the buttons and the cues and what do all the lights do and what are our sound capabilities and stuff of that nature. As we train more and more people to do that, I think we're going to get some really exciting technical stuff arising from that, because you know, improvisers don't like sitting on their hands and not doing anything for 20 minutes. They want to play. And so does David.
And leading from that, that's one of the things for the people I have been training before COVID blew everything out of the water.
Yeah, we're gonna have to retrain everybody when we go back anyway. So
one of the things I was doing was I was encouraging every tech that I was training to find sort of their tech voice, because everybody has different musical influences, music that they like that they're going to be their go-tos. Like my go-to is like EDM and pop, but I'll branch into some other stuff. And somebody else, their go-to might be like Europop and South African disco. Who knows? Yeah, you know, whatever.
I was going to say, I can always tell based on the house music who's running tech.
Right. That's absolutely true. But I love that if Clint was running tech versus me versus Channing versus somebody else, like we're all going to make different musical choices.
Jay running tech is just Carly Rae Jepsen. So.
Yeah. And there's nothing wrong with that.
No, there ain't. But back to editing. But yeah, I think editing, you know, I think often, and I imagine this is true, although I haven't clocked it specifically, but I imagine oftentimes after a show, David, you probably get a pretty good high five from somebody who's like, hey, that rocked. Like, thank you for that. That was perfect. I did not want to go, you know, taking it out at the moment of climax somehow where it's like something's about to happen. Blackout is really exciting because the audience can fill in some of those blanks for themselves, whether that's a scene edit or a show edit. And fill in some of those blanks, wonder where those characters go.
Yes.
Think about think about what happened or didn't happen and sort of make decisions for themselves on those edits, I think is part of the fun of being able to sort of fan fiction your way into whatever the conclusion is or isn't, like
Absolutely.
they're about to kiss.
And with
Blackout.
that said, we're out of time, y'all.
Oh my God.
Oh, already.
You're gonna have to fan fiction your own.
But I
what
had more to
edits like.
say.
You're gonna cut us right at this high point.
Yeah.
Amy, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. It's really, really fun to get perspectives outside of San Antonio and Bexar Stage, and then also get validation about the broader culture of improv and how we all agree on certain things. David, it was a pleasure having a voice of the tech booth now in the show.
I know. I was so excited to get you on today.
Thank you.
And Tina, thank you as always for co-hosting.
Here.
Thank you both. It was lovely to be here.
We had a good
and
time.
Definitely great to talk shop.
It was a lot of fun.
Talking shop is so much fun.
I'll throw some links in the old.
Yeah, we'll throw some links on. Remember, Amy Knop is from Cold Town Theater, and like all theaters around the nation right now, they're going through hard times. So reach out to your local theater, reach out to Bexar Stage, reach out to Cold Town Theater, and give them a donation if you have anything to offer, because it really helps us out in these times where we don't have an audience to help support us.
Yeah, the audience. That's it. You guys.
We are going to have another show on Wednesday of this week. That's 2 days from now. And the topic, Tina, do you want to tease the topic?
It's vulnerability.
Vulnerability. We're going to have
so
some very
personal.
interesting guests on that one, just like we did this week. Anything else that I'm missing? Amy, is there anything you'd like to plug?
Although Cold Town is not in person these days, like most theaters, we have an active Twitch channel, Cold Town TV. Please follow us and
linked
subscribe.
in the chat. So check out Cold Town TV for sure.
And if you want to follow Per Circle Comedy on Facebook or Instagram, we've been putting out some sketch content throughout this too. You can look at some of our recent videos. We'd love to have you.
And I threw up 2 links, one for David's art, which you can see some of behind him, and also that he is a hair artist. David is a hair artist, so if you're looking for a haircut, a safe, sanitized haircut.
All clean, mask wearing, all that good stuff.
This is a David Grinnell original. You can check out those links. Check out bearstage.com. And if you have the means to leave us a little donation, we do really appreciate it. We just had the first of the month. We have to pay rent on an empty building. That's all very sad. A lot of theaters are closing right now. We're trying so hard not to do that. So please, please, please help out small businesses in the arts, especially whenever you can, social justice and all of that jazz. So, but that's it. And we'll see you guys on Wednesday. Thank you so much.